Hey, all, welcome to Geek Freaks. I am Frank, and today I'm joined by Melissa Flores. How you doing, Melissa?
I'm great. How are you? Thank you so much for having me.
I'm doing very, very good. Today we're talking about The Dead Lucky. It's a pretty new series that you're working with over at Image. Can you kind of break down what The Dead Lucky is all about?
Absolutely. The Dead Lucky is the latest book that has come out of the Massiverse, which is Image's new superhero universe that spun out of an amazing comic book called Radiant Black by Kyle Higgins. Uh, Thankfully, I've been friends with Kyle for a little while, and there was an opportunity to create a new book that was part of his universe. Other books that are a part of it are Rogue Sun by Ryan Parrott, who's amazing, and Inferno Girl Red, which is an upcoming graphic novel by Matt Groom. And I apologize, I'm not giving all the artists, but they all deserve all the credit. And I apologize for not giving them all right now. There's some reason they're all blanking in my head. But and we also have a Radiant Red miniseries that just came out and a Radiant Pink miniseries. And all the superhero series are basically superhero stories told in a new way for a new world. So we're basically taking superheroes, which everybody knows is a comic book staple and medium, but we're giving we don't have the baggage of the last 50 years and 20,000 reboots to tell a compelling narrative with them. And so each one of our books redefines a superhero in a different way. The Dead Lucky itself, which I have co-created with my artist, French Carlo, is about a veteran soldier who has come home from Afghanistan after losing most of her platoon in a horrific accident and discovered that the city she grew up in, San Francisco, has been privatized by a company called Morrow. And as a result, created this kind of battleground of a city in which Morrow wants to essentially fix all the problems with San Francisco, but in doing so, kind of bring a military-esque martial law to the land. And there is another gang called the Salvation Gang who obviously don't take that very well, and they're kind of trying to stop that, but in very violent methods. And so it literally has turned her city into a little bit of a war zone. And Bibi, being a soldier, knows how to go to war. So she has decided to step in and try to do what she can to take the fight against Morrow. Unfortunately, or fortunately in this case, she has come away from that horrific accident with superpowers, which allows her to conduct or control electrical currents and see energy spirits. And she uses those energy spirits, these electrical spirits, to possess machines and control them. And she does that with a one called Ghost, and she creates a new mech with him, and that is her partner. And they are out and about trying to stop San Francisco from being taken over.
Energy spirits. I was trying to figure out, okay, are they ghosts that she's just seeing, or is it, actually something that's actually there?
I
Which
mean, that's the question. The
it's the
one thing I've
question.
always been really fascinated by is the idea that energy never stops existing. Energy just changes
Hmm.
form. So, and all we are is a bunch of energy, right? So what happens when we go away? Does the energy go
Yeah.
away too, or does it stay? And that's kind of, so it's a little different than, say, like Rogue Sun, which is very paranormal
Right.
based, with actual ghosts and actual demons and werewolves and that sort of thing. Uh, what BBC is kind of a mix between the paranormal and the tech.
Yeah.
We're trying to very much keep this like ghost in the machine kind of aesthetic
Yeah.
and theme for that book.
I'm enjoying it quite a bit so far. I've already read the first two, and I can't wait for the
Did
third
you
one to
read the
come out on
second
the
one?
fifth. I
You're the
did,
first
yes.
person that I like talked to that has read the second one. Did you like it?
I did. I'm especially liking her relationship with Ghost and how it's kind of like this combatant. It's they're almost like brother and
Yeah.
sister, siblings, and you they're got each other's back, but they're always on each other's nerves a little bit,
Oh
you
my
know.
gosh. When is this coming out? Is this coming out after tomorrow?
My plan was to try to. I was going to talk to you about that afterwards. We'll edit this round, but I was going to talk to you about that. If you want this to come out like on the 5th to coincide with the third issue coming out, we can do that.
I mean, whichever you prefer, but like either way, because I was like, oh my God, you're the first person I know
Yeah.
that's read issue two that's not in my immediate circle. So I was like, I want to ask you so many questions, but we can do that after. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Uh, It's a wonderful series so far, and I really like the fact that we're setting up this future world that feels so relatable, doesn't feel like it's that distant future, and the problems we're seeing here today. Was there a particular thing you wanted to make sure to tell through this story and bring a light to?
Absolutely, yes. The book was inspired heavily by my relationship with my girlfriend, or my partner, one of the two. Either way, we've been together forever. I don't even know what she is anymore. But the only thing I know is that we're not married, but she's basically my partner. And she's a veteran and she was in the army for a very long time. And now she's not in the army for a very long time. And through her experiences and her friends, I kind of became fascinated with the idea of PTSD and survivor's guilt. Um, and how that affects our soldiers when they come home after the incredible experiences that a lot of them have. Um, and so this book is essentially a love letter to those kind of people, not just to those people, but the people that love them, the moms, the dads, the brothers, the sisters, the girlfriends, the boyfriends, the friends who come home to an entirely different, or witness an entirely different person come back. And the loneliness that they must feel of not being able to share the experiences that they had. With the people that love them that are home. And so I really wanted to shed a light on PTSD, on survivor's guilt, on what that means, not in a way that sensationalizes it, but or even in a way that tries to fix it, but more in a way to understand it and also give a little attention to it, just to say, hey, uh, you're not alone. Other people are experiencing this too, because I imagine it could be a very lonely place.
Yeah. Speaking about that loneliness, we see that she talks to herself often, and then she's also talking to these ghosts. Is that a way of her kind of processing that loneliness, kind of creating another voice in the room with her?
Um, yes, I mean you've read one and two, so I don't know how spoilery we want to get, but yes,
Not too
I
bad.
think narratively, as you know, speaking outside of that world, what or in her head as the writer, I really wanted a way for the audience to understand what's going on in her head because she's a
Right.
very closed off character. She doesn't really speak to anybody, not even her therapist, about what's actually going on in her head, but which is fine for the characters around her, but I did not want that for the readers.
Hmm.
But I also didn't want this like Batman-esque, like I am the night and in this
Right.
room is my darkness. Like I didn't want her to be that person either. It doesn't feel like she's that person. And so I wanted to find narratively a really interesting way to draw the reader in, make them feel like a friend to her. And so that became a very concentrated effort to have her speaking directly to the reader, but in the story, speaking to herself, supposedly.
Yeah.
And that is how she gets away with it. Now, at the end of the book, you realize the first book, she's actually not just talking to herself, she's actually talking to these energy spirits that only she can see that linger around her. Um, but I mean, that's a problem for her, in that the only people she really opens up to are the people that are no longer there. And so I really wanted this dichotomy of the people that are actively trying to love her, not being able to really get into her, but her still being stuck between this world, between the living and the dead. So it kind of had two different parts for me. Narratively, I wanted the readers to feel a little more invested, and I hoped that was a way to do that. And two, I liked the idea of one, we all talk to ourselves, even if we don't admit it. But two, but she just admits it.
Hmm.
But two, you know, it's a way for her to stay connected to these things that she sees that nobody else does.
Yeah. I just like how it's an expansion on the inner dialogue that we see so often in comic books, the cloud bubbles that, but this time she's actually talking to herself. And then when you see Eddie reference it, you're like, oh wow, yeah, I'm not the only one noticing this is off. These bubbles are a little bit different. And I think her being seen as a little bit off by others is probably very common for somebody who just came back from, a war front like that.
Yeah, and I think she uses it honestly to her advantage. You know, as she says more than once in the first issue, the army made me weird.
Yeah.
And it's very flippant and dismissive, but I think only if people choose to take it that way. And I think she does it because she knows when she says that, and you kind of see it a little bit when she has that interaction with the soldier or with the Moro guardian at the beginning, where she makes a point of telling him she just got out from therapy, and he kind of does that little like thing with his
Hmm.
hand. It's like, oh, it's a Lieutenant Dan situation. Like it's so easy to dismiss it now that it's such a trope now that, soldiers come back with PTSD and that they have problems or whatever. And I wanted to kind of have her use that a little bit if she
Yeah.
could, to not deal with or not have to focus on the fact that she is has these legitimate ghosts that are around her. This is a very easy way for her to stay weird, and not have to have people question it.
Yeah, it disarms them immediately. It's perfect. Speaking of that therapy session, one of the little details I truly liked is while the we see the therapist notes, and we don't necessarily see the therapist write new notes, but constantly circling old notes as if it's the same thing Bibby's saying every time she comes
Yeah.
in. She's just repeating a script that's in her head. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the therapy thing was very important to me. I feel like it was I don't want to give therapists a bad name at all because I think they all try very, very hard. But and I think that BB is doing the right thing and going to therapy. But I think also um it also was a way to kind of point out that therapy only works as long as you're ready for it to
Yeah,
work.
absolutely.
And it felt very much like a ceremonial, let's just get through this thing. And I think in showing that the therapist is human too and that she's not used to dealing with this kind of person, it allows them both, I think, to adjust over the narrative. And
Yeah.
I'm hoping to be able to bring the therapist back and have BB continue to have these sessions. I mean, the first 6 issues are a little bit of a crazy ride. There's not going to be a lot of time for her to go back to therapy, but I'm hoping as through the issues we see the therapist more and see the growth in that relationship, because I think
Yeah.
if they both put in the effort, it will actually start helping. BB's just not in the right place for it yet.
And just like so many other things that I'm really enjoying about this, radiant black universe created over at Image, the fact that we see a therapist is something we don't see in other superhero worlds, and yet obviously Batman would need to talk to somebody. You
Yeah.
know, Green Lantern is constantly in space and back on Earth. He would have to discuss that with somebody, and it's good to see that a therapist is being normalized, and I think
Yeah.
that's a really good source.
Yeah, and it's one of those things. I mean, I grew up in a Latino family, and I was very ADHD,
Mm-hmm.
extremely, and even just begging my mom to take me to even see a psychiatrist to get a learning, like to be diagnosed. I knew I had it. I knew something was wrong with me,
Mm-hmm.
because I was like, I didn't understand. I had like been treated as very gifted growing up in school. It was never a problem because I had these small classes, and every time I was bored, I would get these other problems that the teachers would give me when I was done with my work. I had been asked to skip a grade and like done a bunch of stuff, so I knew I wasn't dumb. But once I got to high school and I went to this math and science school, the California Academy of Math and Science, um, I had such a hard time with like memorization and statistics. And like I knew that there wasn't because I wasn't trying. And it was so frustrating to me because I would beg, I'd be like, Mom, like there's something wrong. And not any my mom was great. I had a
Of
lovely
course.
mother who loved us very much and worked very hard and was very supportive. But, she hadn't grown up with that mentality that,
Right.
like, Latinos, especially, I feel like we don't go to the doctor. We don't
Yeah.
go to the shrink. You don't want your family thinking that you're local.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, no, you're just lazy. There's nothing wrong with you.
Mm-hmm.
And as a testament to the growth of family. I mean, now we have, I have nieces, I have cousins and everybody, and it's such a completely different world where we make sure that they're, my mom, my grandma, my sisters, everybody makes sure that they're properly seen by people and making
Yeah.
sure that, it's a different kind of parenting that exists now. And I think a lot of that happened because it was normalized.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm very grateful for that. But that's also why I wanted to just see the therapist in the office, because I feel like everybody should benefit from therapy at one point or another. I
Yeah.
haven't done it nearly as much as I should, honestly.
Yeah.
But even this is a way to kick my ass and get me back to go to therapy because I need it. But
Well, and the more material you can go in and ask questions like, what would a therapist say in the situation? Say I'm seeing two ghosts.
I know. Can you imagine? Like, are you here for research or therapy? I'm like, both.
Yeah, can it be both? Don't charge extra. Yeah, you're building a really cool world here. It's a San Francisco where we have two different major factions, obviously, and Bibby's creating this third one. I find myself not sure which one's the bad guy in this. Was that your intention, where you weren't sure if you should be
Yes.
rooting for the gang?
That is the intention because it is one of those things where so often, especially in a war story, which is essentially what this is,
Hmm.
there is it's so easy to say there's a bad guy, right? But when you get to the level of these big conflicts, both people think the other people are the bad guys, and they have
Yeah.
very good reasons to do it. Even if you look at the war that's happening in the Ukraine right now, these
Right.
Russian soldiers, were told that they were going in to save the Ukrainians. They didn't know how they would be received.
Right.
Um, when you really look at conflict and what happens to both sides, I think it is one of those things. It's so much easier if you just give somebody a bad guy to root for. But in a war story, if I want to tell it authentically, both sides have to really have a goal and think that they're in the right. And it doesn't make it easy for me for sure. And like Kyle Higgins, who creatively consults on every book, has like kicked my ass about it when he's like, but what does she want? What do they
Yeah.
want? What is the point? And and I'm like, well, she doesn't know what she wants. So that's the point. She's out. The only thing she knows how to do is to be a soldier. And so it's kind of an easy regression in her. But picking the side, like who's the good guy and who's the bad guy, I mean, Morrow has very good intentions.
Hmm.
They see the problem in that, we don't have privatized health. I mean, we don't have universal health care, and the police are underfunded, and there's a big drug problem, and there's crime on the rise. And they're like, we know how to fix it. But unfortunately, when you include corporations and profit,
Yeah.
um, that skews what really truly believe in their mission. People like Valentine. Valentine absolutely believes that this is the right thing that they should do. And she has very personal reasons for doing so. But the way they go about it maybe is not the best idea. And there's people in that company that maybe don't have the best interests of San Francisco at heart. The same with Salvation Gang. You have
Yeah.
people who join who are very specifically, they truly do not believe, look, we don't need Morrow. We don't need relocation. We don't need any. And there's those people in there who are saying, my life has been ruined by Morrow and I'm ready to fight back and take back my city. There's other people that are probably just there for the war,
Yeah.
just there for the chaos and the anarchy. And this win at all costs that happens. And so that's why you see her basically trying to like figure out who the bad guy is.
Hmm.
And because she's been in war zones before and she knows there's bad guys and good guys, but at the same time, like we're the bad guys in some in some instances when
Yeah.
people look at us, we're the bad guys. The US soldiers come in and we don't think we are, we're just following orders. So it's meant to be complicated and messy and a lot more sobering because we're on domestic soil. This isn't happening in some world, like in some
Yeah.
overseas or across the borders that we can just pretend it doesn't happen. It's happening here. And so that's stuff that she's constantly trying to figure out. We will see her take sides, like ultimately take a side.
Hmm.
Um, but I feel like that choice will be surprising, and her reasons for doing it will be a little controversial, I think. But hopefully, people will follow enough to like see where the journey takes her.
Yeah. I do like the idea of this like complex decision coming forward, and what would be easiest for her, someone who was a veteran, and would be just like, yeah, these guys are the good guys, those guys are the bad guys. But just like today and all our problems today, that's just not the world we live in.
Yeah.
So it's good to see her also live in that world. Yeah.
Yeah, it would be inauthentic to not portray it that way, I think.
Yeah. You've worked so hard on other projects. I first was introduced to you through Power Rangers, of course, and I think a lot of people are familiar with you through that. Was there anything that you brought forward from your work with that big project into this new one?
Um, yeah, I mean, I learned story on Power Rangers. I learned development. I forged the relationships that I continue to work today with on Power Rangers. I wouldn't know Kyle, I wouldn't know Ryan, I wouldn't know Daphne or any of the Matt or Michael if were it not for my work on Power Rangers. And so I think one, learning how to work with those specific people, but two, just learning story and world building. We all were
Yeah.
kind of doing that together, and I got to learn from the best when it came to comic books. I still am learning from people like Kyle and Michael and Ryan and Matt. You know, we sit in these big rooms, and even Daphne, when we talk about Power Rangers, we sit in these rooms, and I'm constantly being challenged in very good ways on how to narratively make my stories better. And what I love about Power Rangers that it was a superhero story that was about good overcoming evil, and these constant barrage of villains that come to try and take over the world. Um, Finding the depth in that and finding the color in that for a comic book was really validating and fun. And so to be able to take a good versus evil kind of story, a superhero story, and kind of put my own twist on it, but still set it in a world like the Massiverse, it'll let me feel like there were rules I could follow and that I wasn't alone in it. I think this would be a very different experience for me had it not, if this just been one, it wouldn't have happened. This wouldn't,
Mhm.
if it had been my first book, I wouldn't have had it with Image, first
Right,
of
right.
all. It wouldn't have happened without Kyle. But also, having it be set in this narrative and having, these amazing, incredible writers, Eisner nominated writers, best-selling writers, on the book and giving me advice and telling me, giving their perspective on the stories. Um, it's a blessing that I could not have anticipated, and I'm very thankful for.
You sound like you've learned a lot from these guys and just this entire team. You were talking about trying to make a story better. What's that first thing you're going to do to try to make your baseline story and elevate it?
It's always character. You always have to with every scene, and I'm a staff writer on another show as well, and we're constantly battling with this. You have to approach every scene with what one, do we need it? Two,
Mhm.
what does it get us? And three, what does it get the character? Like the character you have to know what a character wants in every single interaction. You can't just have an interaction just to have it. You have to reveal it's something new about the character. You have to push the narrative forward, or you have to, even something very innocuous, you have to reveal something about the world that's going to get you to where you're going, especially in a comic book where the art is so precious.
Yeah.
You have to, there's no panel that is wasted. You have 22 pages and maybe, anywhere from 1 to 6 panels a page, 7 if you're feeling particularly like mean to the artist, to truly tell the story that you're trying to tell. So you have to be very specific, and very open to collaboration as to
Yeah.
what you want to show, because the artist also has opinions on what he or she thinks is best for the story. And so for me, it required adjusting. We originally had a 6 issue arc that I was really excited about, and then as we continued to write, it was one of those things that required us to pivot and be like, you know what, this is probably not the best direction. What can we do to make this feel tighter, make this feel more succinct, really address what BB wants and how she's going to get it? And it can be hard, it can be rough because you have to take a lot of like ego bruising and be like, you can't go into it being like, I'm a genius, everything's amazing that I write, how dare you say this isn't working? You can't do that.
Yeah.
If you want something to succeed, you have to take, especially, you have to take notes, and you have to be open to what people are telling you, because nobody is giving you notes if you trust them, and these people are taking the time. Incredibly busy writers are taking time to read your stuff. Nobody is giving you notes that they think is just for the sake of giving a note. They're giving you notes because they want the story to be better and they want the story to succeed. And as talented as I think that I am, and I think I do have talent, it is one of those things where like these guys have been doing this a lot longer than me. So I have to listen to what they're saying. And it's never them telling me this is what you have to do with the book, but it's a lot of let's talk about how to make this book great.
Yeah.
And considering who I'm writing with on this series and who I'm following on Power Rangers, like the last thing I want to do is make this feel like the weak book,
Yeah.
if that makes sense.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. You've got big shoes to fill, and I think you're doing quite well at it. But
Oh,
yeah,
thank you.
it is tough. Now, taking this kind of constructive criticism, we'll say, can be very difficult for people in the creative field. And we talk to a lot of indie creators, indie comic book writers that are one man teams and stuff like that. They're just out there by themselves. And so they get their feedback from social media, from readers. How do you filter that from, say, a troll versus somebody trying to truly help you better yourself?
I think even just looking at the intention of what it is or the comments that other people like, there are people that are just truly just angry people.
Yeah.
There is an entitlement on social media, but I was with Power Rangers for 10 years. I am no stranger to people hating my guts because they don't like something. Um, what I have noticed, it becomes very easy to filter out the people that are giving you true feedback versus people that are just like, I hate this and because you didn't do what I wanted you to do. And you can't let those people get to you because it's going to happen no matter what. People become very attached to characters, people become very
Yeah.
attached to story. Fandom is an incredibly precious thing. I mean, I wrote fan fiction. There were times when I wanted to kill the Glee writers. Like, I get it. Um, what has helped me a lot was, I was a producer for 10 years. I have been in rooms where people have had to make decisions based on budget, based on narrative, based on marketing, based on that or stuff that is maybe not in the best interest of the story, or maybe a direction that we know may not be popular, but for A, B, and C, we had to do it. And and you're not the only person giving notes sometimes. Sometimes you do have to take notes from people that aren't creatives because that is just the world we live in.
Hmm.
And being in that position and being the person that gave those notes, not just for myself, but for the people that were above me, that sometimes I was like, I don't agree with this note, but I have to give it. It really allows me to, especially when it comes to taking notes from other producers and other networks and that sort of thing, it allows me to take those better, I think, and take those less personally.
Yeah.
When it comes to the online stuff, it's actually really, really funny. There was a couple times where I've seen people, especially when the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers news came out, there was a couple people that are like, "Who is this girl? She has no credits." Um, I didn't have to say anything because other fans immediately jumped in and let them know who I was.
Yeah.
Um, and so I think, if you let it get to you, it's going to get to you no matter what. I mean, I think we're all going to see something that's going to bug the crap out of us sometimes. And for me, I know this is a male dominated industry. I know I'm the only female writer with an ongoing in the Massiverse. I know that it's going to be a little bit of a different experience than these incredible men who have written so many books before me. But I focus on the feedback that I feel like is genuine and valid and coming from a good place.
Yeah.
And less on the ones that's just like this sucks because I don't like the suit, or this sucks because I don't want to see another soldier story, or this sucks because, I don't like the colors. Like you can tell somebody's different. You can also tell when it's somebody that is just really upset that it's that you writing the story and not them. Like there's a
Yeah.
few people like
Right.
that. I've always told people that if you're trying to be an aspiring writer and you want to be a professional writer, maybe don't like go and troll a bunch of working writers on Twitter because that kind of
Yeah.
stuff sticks.
Yes.
And people like maybe try to be positive to these other writers that you're trying to network and maybe not like think you're going to get ahead by telling everybody what's wrong with what you think is wrong with their stories
Yeah.
because I don't think it's going to get you anywhere. So it's very you can like once you get enough of the both good and bad feedback, it's very easy to just hit the mute button and be like,
Yeah.
okay, I know exactly who you are and where you're coming from. I don't really need to worry about you. Mute.
I like the idea that the statement you said here, as somebody who, if you're wanting to give advice, the I don't agree with this note, but I have to give it. And I really like that idea of like, look, I personally love your work as is, but this is how the public might be better accepting to it or something like that. It's a very interesting note. And I think even I know as podcasters, we create this community as well, and we're constantly giving each other's notes. And I think that's a very positive way to hand out some helping hand. I like that a lot.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think one of the best things you can do is just be open to this kind of discussion and to talk to people about it, but also always remember that maybe you're not as fans, we don't know everything that's going on in every room and we don't know every reason why decisions are made. And And so what may seem like a very dumb decision to us, like honestly, I don't understand why Batgirl was canceled, and I'm very upset about it.
You're telling me, oh my
You know,
goodness, what a bad choice.
um, I don't know what that decision was all about, but I'm not going to be like, I mean, what can I do, right? I mean, it was done. Like me yelling on the Twitter sphere about it isn't going to bring it back. And
Yeah.
like that's never been done before. So they probably had a reason for it. Um, we're not privy to what that reason was.
I just want to know the reason though.
I know, but and that's what's so frustrating
Yeah.
about being online is that we're as much as we want to know, they don't have an obligation to tell us.
Right. Yeah.
And
And sometimes the mystery is what's best for them, really. It's just to not let, and hopefully
exactly,
it dies
yeah.
down.
Yeah,
Yeah.
even with Power Rangers, there was decisions that were made that people were just like, this is so dumb. Why did they do this? And there's so many times I'm being like, there's 1,000 reasons why that was done, but
Yeah.
it's not up to us to tell you. Like
Yeah.
we have our own reasons, and like as fans, we're not entitled to know everything as much as we want to know everything.
Yeah. And it's hard because in this world even in the world you're building here, information is so freely available that we just assume that we have the right to all of it.
Yeah.
And you have to wait. You have to enjoy what you see.
Yeah, I think it's just finding that happy medium. And I
Yeah.
fall into the same trap too. I'm one of those people that I'm just like, I don't understand why you're doing this. Why would you cancel the show? It was so good. And it could sometimes it is sometimes just a dumb executive making a bonehead stupid decision, you know.
Hmm.
And sometimes there's another reason. You never know.
Yeah.
You never know. And so I don't like to assume, but but I understand the frustration, and I try to be as transparent as I can be, but I also tend to not say a lot because of that reason. Because I feel like if I start saying too much, people are going to think that I'm saying everything, and so
Ooh,
it's about
yeah.
trying to find that balance.
Yeah. That's a very good point too, because of your position, they think everything that you might be saying on a personal level will translate to, oh, here's the inside scoop. That's hard to deal with, I'm sure, as a person who just wants to express your own personal feelings.
Yeah, but I mean, thankfully, I've had really positive experiences with fans, and I've learned to mute very quickly the ones that I think are
Yeah.
not positive. And that has mute button has saved me
Oh
so
yeah.
much stress.
I'm a big fan of it too. Yeah. The classic, don't feed the trolls. They'll starve if you don't feed them. Yeah.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. It's one of those things where I've had friends that just like will like rant about like this 2 hour Facebook argument that they got into, and I was just like,
Yeah.
but why? Why?
Yeah.
You're not going to change their mind. They're just out there to get attention. Why are you giving it to them? And now you're so upset and they're happy because they've ruined your day. Like just ignore it, dude. Let it
They're
go. You're not,
yeah, they're living rent free in your head now. You've
yeah,
done that. You welcomed them in.
exactly.
You were speaking to the colors and stuff. And I really have to. I love these colors that are in these comic books. All of them. That the radiant black, of course, and the dead lucky. It reminds me of this. It's a vibrant world. It's almost like a cyberpunk meets anime, and some old good old Saturday morning cartoons as well. Can you speak to the art team that's working with you on this book?
Absolutely. So, the suit design itself was designed by Federico Sabatini, who is currently, I believe, on Moon Knight. He's an incredible Italian artist that helped me design BB suit. It was designed to be a tokusatsu inspired kind of suit, so it meant to be
Okay.
close fitting with a helmet
Hmm.
to hide her identity. I wanted it specifically to be very Day of the Dead inspired.
Oh, nice.
And because it is based on that sugar skull, that's calavera,
Hmm.
those are painted in beautiful neon colors. And so that really informed the suit. So the markings on her face, those are all, very neon. And once we got what the markings on her face looked like, it was very easy to turn that suit into something else. And there were only so many colors we could work with because Kyle in his greediness took all of them when he created like 4 different radiants.
Yeah.
So we had to make sure that BB's costume felt or suit felt distinct and different. And it didn't Rogue Sun was black and Inferno Girl was already red. And so
Mhm.
we went with a purple pink because that felt very unique and it felt very uh thematically close to like a Day of the Dead kind of color scheme. And the book itself, I mean, I really I had just finished the Cyberpunk 2077
Yep.
storyline. I played it when it first came out, and I was like, I hate this, and I'm going to give it 2 years, and so for them to actually like do something here, and so I finally went back and played the campaign. I really enjoyed it, and really obsessed with Arcane. And I've always been
You're
obsessed
killing it.
with yeah, I've always been obsessed with robots. So like, so and Blade Runner. And so when it became time to like what kind of book do I want and what kind of book makes sense, like design makes sense, um, that's the look we started like really gravitating towards. And so we brought on French Carlo Mangolo, who was the artist. He's incredible. He had done Power Rangers. He had done a good issue of Radiant Black, and he really understood what we're trying to go for. And then Mattia, I had worked with on a backup series called The Unleashed that was based on a Twitch
Mhm.
series that I had done, and I really loved his colors there. And they work together. They're both Italian, so they can speak to each other in Italian. So they work together really, really well. And then obviously Kyle had a very specific vision for this book as well. So when it came to color, I mean, Kyle used to be a color. I don't what they say. He did something in editing, but like he knows his colors very, very well.
Yeah.
And he's a director, so he tends to be very specific. And so it was also a lot of narrative direction from Kyle, making sure that we really got that cyberpunk Blade Runner arcane kind of punch and pop that I
Yeah.
think, we kind of lost in like the desaturated DC-ness.
Hmm.
Maybe no, I mean it's changing now thanks to like people like Dan Mora who have gone to DC and
Yeah.
are literally changing the look of DC back to because
A
he
lot of
likes
that
Power
future
Rangers.
state and yeah,
Yeah, and
that's
Son
starting
of
to really pop as
Kal-El
well.
and yeah, and all
Yes.
these different ones that are just like bright and poppy again.
Yeah.
And I think it's good to see that all come back. The 90s are apparently back now. Everybody's doing
Hey, I'm
so.
happy for it too. Give me the sharp pointiness of all the costumes. I'm okay with that. Everything had spikes. Um, yes, and the colors, I like how they kind of translate through the page of again with those factions. You could tell this like pink lighting and lightning that makes sense, and then even with the Salvation Gang, everything seems to have a little bit of green here, a little bit of green there. It's almost like it
Yeah.
reminds you how you were saying with Cyberpunk. You can tell what gang you were fighting based off of oh, these guys chose blue or whatever it was. Everybody had their faction, and it translates so well in comic books. Something I didn't really think about before until you see it, and it
Yeah.
looks very nice.
The Salvation Gang was actually we liked Batman Forever, that neon gang
Yeah,
in Batman Forever.
yeah.
And we wanted to again stick to these kind of like cyberpunky neon aesthetics, but we were thinking about what a gang would look like in this kind of technologically advanced city if they're trying to avoid facial recognition
Hmm.
software and all the stuff that can happen. And so like, well, they'd be covering their faces. They'd be using these kind of one wheels because those are quick to get around. And like, what kind of colors do we want for them? Moro is very stark and white. And so we really
Right.
wanted something that balances. So we immediately were just kind of in love with the Batman Forever kind of neon aesthetic. And so we kind of like went in that direction, also mixed with a lot of this, like we went online, like everything in the Dead Lucky is kind of based on technology that kind of exists now,
Hmm.
just pushed forward a couple years. And so when you look for there's these kind of masks you can wear that you allow people like machines to not recognize your face. They use them
Right.
a lot in Hong Kong
Yeah.
for the rioting and everything. And so that was where that came from. But I think they look really cool.
I think that's important to remind everybody. We are talking a lot about different properties and that are farther in the future than this is. This feels like it could be 10 years from now pretty easily.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. I mean, this is meant to be San Francisco in the present, but if our present technology wise was 5 years in the future, basically
yeah,
Morrow has come in and paid billions and billions of dollars to upgrade the city with their tech. So this is the
yeah,
only city in the world that looks like this right
yeah.
now.
And they came in almost as oh, we'll do a favor. This will be a test run. We're going to do you guys a favor and help you out with this. And I think that I'm just personally from just two issues, I have a feeling that the people in San Francisco have a very different outlook on Morrow than maybe somebody in Chicago that's like, oh, San Francisco, they're doing fine. They're taken care of. When you're on the streets of San Francisco, you might be seeing things a little differently.
Yeah, well, it's one of those things where, Morrow wants to, I say, so much, I hate it.
That's okay.
When Morrow wants to fix the city, turn it into the city of tomorrow, whatever their tagline is now. What does that mean in terms of the people that are there? Who becomes a desirable and who becomes an undesirable? Like,
Yeah.
who do they want in their city?
And who
And
makes that decision?
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This feels so close to home. It's scary. I mean, I've been to San Francisco so many times, and when you're seeing some of these sites, you're like, oh boy, yeah, I know where that's at. I know I've seen this, and
Yeah.
so it hits home.
It was great. I'm not from San Francisco, but my girlfriend is. And so a couple months before the book started, I actually went there for like 3 or 4 days and just walked the city and
Hmm.
took a ton of pictures. And honestly, I've been to San Francisco before. I was shocked at what it looked like now.
Yeah.
The homelessness and
Mhm.
the crime, like people were leaving their car doors open because they were just so tired of their car windows being smashed.
Yeah, that's common. Yeah.
And yeah, and like there was curfews being put in place, and like, like we would walk, it was like a minute it turned dark. Sandra was like, it's not safe to be out, let's go.
Yeah.
Like it was such a different experience. And I think one of the most magical moments for me was when we were in the financial district, and then we walked into the Stockton tunnel, and then on the other side emerged into Chinatown, and I was like, it's like a new world.
Yeah, it really is.
It just felt like how distinct those districts are. It just like, this is a really magical city. It feels like such a shift from like old and new and tech and this history and the tragedy that comes behind the city with the earthquakes and the fires and I was like, this has to be where this happens, because this feels like the only city where it could.
Yeah, and even with Chinatown, their history with uniting together to try to find some sort of common
Yeah,
ground and strengthen people, and how
yeah.
much that reflects on your story right here, where you see the Salvation Gang, which I'm already rooting for. I realize is really just trying to find unity amongst themselves and stand up against what they see as oppressors, which might not be 100%, but yeah,
Yeah, I
it's a
mean, the
wonderful
whole
story.
point that Chinatown was created was because they weren't allowed anywhere else.
Yeah, yeah,
And people forget that now. It's just a tourist attraction. It's like, no, the this was done because there was so much discrimination against the Chinese people that they were literally not allowed to go anywhere else.
and
It's
they
crazy.
thrived, and then became decades later that became the desirable spot, and it's
Yeah.
like, hey, that's what happens when you just work together, people. And I think in this comic book we're going to see that, and I'm excited to see Bibby evolve, and not even evolve really, but just deal with being herself. And I think
Yeah.
that's going to be really nice to see. It's really cool.
I hope so.
So let's go ahead and get some people out there to the shops, guys. It's going to be October 5th. Number 3 is hitting the comic book shops, correct?
I believe so.
So too. Okay.
You would know
So
better than me, honestly, at this
okay,
point.
it's October 5th, guys. I'm gonna let you know that right now. So head to your local comic book shops if possible. Of course, support the local shops and pick up your copy of The Dead Lucky. And while you're there,
Yes.
check out Radiant Black and everything else. I mean, you're going to recognize the to me the art just seems so cohesive amongst the entire series. So I'm very happy with that. It makes it feel combined together.
Yeah.
So go shopping, guys. And again, it's October 5th. That's The Dead Lucky. Thank you so much for joining me today, Melissa.
Of course, Frank. Thank you so much for having me. I really had a good time.
I appreciate that. All right, guys, we will see you guys next week.